The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus told his disciples this parable. A man going on a journey called in his servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to a third 1, to each according to his ability, and then he went away. After a long time, the master of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. The one who received 5 talents came forward, bringing an additional 5. He said, Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I made 5 more. His master said to him, Well done, my good and faithful servant. Since you were faithful in small matters, I will give you great responsibilities. Come share your master's joy. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
It's easy sometimes to think that this parable, talking about talents, is a parable about having a talent. Somebody who has a talent of playing the piano. Somebody who has a beautiful voice that can sing. It could be a talent of anything, practically, but that's not what this parable is referring to at all. It's got nothing to do with anything physical. It's got everything to do with the graces that God gives to the human being and how they're supposed to multiply in our lives. To some he gives more, to some he gives less, and some waste it. Some waste the graces that God gives to them because they waste their lives. Having said that, it's really all I want to say about that because, as you know, for those that have been here, I have been doing a little sort of mini-series on Purgatory. We've done 2 parts. Today I want to do the last part, which is the 3rd part, and I want to read from a book, from an interview that was done by a nun to a lady by the name of Maria Simmer, who now has died. She lived in Austria. And the last couple of weeks, I talked about the doctrine of purgatory, where it came from, how do we understand it, and so on, the theological dimensions, and how can a soul that goes to confession, why does it have to go to purgatory, if it goes to purgatory, and so on and so on. So I'm not going to re-talk about that because it would just take too much time. But you certainly can, if you're interested in it, because we are living in a time where we seem to have, even as Catholics, we seem to have forgotten the dimension of purgatory. Most of us, okay, we understand heaven. We might understand hell as well. Now, many people think, well, the devil doesn't exist, there's no hell, and so on. God, why would somebody send God? Why would God send somebody to hell? Well, as I often explain to people, look, God sends no one to hell. A person sends themselves to hell because of the way they live their lives. They choose to go to hell. Our judgment, when you stand before the judgment seat of Christ, is our life. By the way, we lived it. Every day, everything we do either brings us closer to God or brings us further away from God. In the end, when we stand before God, there are no words exchanged. It's our life that determines where we will spend eternity. And as explained before, some people have not been bad enough to go to hell, but they haven't been good enough to go straight to heaven when they die. So there is a medium place. There's a place in between called purgatory, and thanks be to God because it's an act of God's mercy. Because the only way that one can get into heaven is with perfect love. Most baptized Christians don't die with perfect love in their souls. Perfect love means a purified human being. A human being who has no attachments to the world, a human being who loves God above all things and puts God above all things and puts God first and foremost in everything that it does, in every way that it thinks, in every way that it speaks, and in every way that it acts. How many people do that? It's a hard thing to achieve. Now, it can be done because we have saints that have done it. But it is a hard thing. One has to have a tremendous amount of humility, and especially in the modern world today, where the word humility is sort of kind of pushed aside. What do you mean I got to be humble? I got to take somebody else's BS and swallow it without lashing out, without getting angry. People don't want to hear that today. It's not the modern mentality. But in reality, if we're ever going to grow in holiness, humility is the number one virtue, which comes from the Latin word humus, which simply means dirt or earth. It's where all the virtues grow. They grow in that earth, that dirt of humility. So it's not one of those things, like I said, that is very common today. So hopefully, probably many of us, like I said, we probably haven't lived our lives in such a terrible way that we would end up in hell. But we certainly haven't lived it well enough to go straight to heaven when we died. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it certainly is something we need to think about. So I want to talk a little bit more about purgatory today, and the reason for that being, like I said too, is also because in the world, in the time we're living in today, go to any funeral, and everybody now is in heaven. I don't care if it's a Catholic funeral service, if it's a Christian funeral service, it doesn't matter. Everybody's in heaven. Whether that person hasn't been to church, been an atheist, lived in sin, drank alcohol, did drugs, adultery, you name it, everybody's in heaven. The idea of accountability before God has sort of been pushed aside. We all have fallen into this dimension or understanding that salvation is owed to us. It's an easy thing. If we just show up on church on Sunday, we'll go to heaven. Well, that's not exactly true. One can still go to hell for all the sins committed on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday afternoon. So it's something that we need to understand. But like I said, nobody wants to hear about this idea, that the human being is judged. We just kind of want to send them straight to heaven. And then God sends no one to hell. Like I said, no, he doesn't. We send ourselves to hell by the way we live our lives. So let's talk a little bit in this particular third part of purgatory about an interview that was done by this nun of a woman who died, I remember in 2002 or 2004. Her name was Maria Sima. She lived in a little house in a little village called Sonntag, which is in the mountains in Austria. She's a simple country woman who since her childhood had prayed a great deal for the holy souls in purgatory. When she was young, she was favored with very particular charism in the church, which is rare, but the charism of being visited by the souls in purgatory. She's a fervent Catholic, has great humility. This struck me a lot. Now, this is a sister speaking who's doing the interview. She has a great simplicity. She's very much encouraged in her task by her parish priest and her local bishop. In spite of the quite extraordinary character of her charism, she lives in real poverty. For example, in her little room, we had hardly enough space to move around a chair. She had offered us. So if you read the book, you read her life a little bit. She's living in a house with a dirt floor, and the chickens are walking around the living room. Great humility and great poverty. And she had a tremendous charism, never took a dime, never took anything from anyone. Because many souls would come to her and ask. They wanted to know if such and such a soul that had died was in purgatory, if they were in heaven, or if they went to hell, or whatever, and so on and so on. A lot of times, she would be able to get the answers for them. An extraordinary charism, yes. But it has its deep roots in the history of the church, for many of our saints have exercised this charism. And I've read many of the examples, many of the lives of the saints who've had this particular experience, like souls that have gone to heaven, like Don Bosco, souls that have gone to hell, like Sister Josefa Menendez, who used to go to hell quite regularly. What an experience that was. But anyways, St. Gertrude had a great love for the holy souls. She probably is the greatest saint when it comes to the holy souls. Of course, she had an opportunity to see what the souls go through in purgatory, their purification process. St. Catherine of Genoa is another one. They wrote much on the subject. St. Miriam of Jesus, St. Margaret Mary of Alacoque, who certainly is the one who had the visions of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Then we have the Curie of Ars, patron saint of priests. We have Sister Faustina, the Divine Mercy Saint, St. John Bosco, St. Miriam of Bethlehem, and so on and so on. There are many books written on this, and there probably could be more written on this as well. When we look closely at the teaching of these saints, we see that all of them say the exact same thing. And Maria Sima, for her part, only relives their beautiful testimony. This is why I did not hesitate to interview her, as she has the advantage of living in our own times and is willing to make herself available. You can easily imagine that I swamped her with questions, and I made the most of it. And I have no doubts, part of the reason why God allowed this particular woman to have this experience is because, like Padre Pio and St. John Marie Vianney, for about 100 years, now Padre Pio dies in 1968, had the gift of reading hearts in confession. Now, why did God do that? Both of these priests, John Marie Vianney and Padre Pio, had the gift of reading hearts, most of all, of course, in confession, but even outside of confession, many, many other graces besides, multiplication of food, being in different places at the same time, and so on and so on. But the reason that God always does things with a purpose. And he did that, I have no doubts, because the time was coming when people no longer go to confession. Look at the confession lines on a Saturday. There's nobody there. But everybody goes to communion. We're supposed to go to confession at least once a year, minimum. I always recommend at least once a month or once every other month if you want to have any sort of kind of a spiritual life. So he allowed these two saints to remind us of the beauty of the sacrament of confession. But in the end, people don't go to confession. And then I have no doubts he allowed Maria Sima to have this experience, even though we had many saints throughout the centuries, particularly in our own time. Because the doctrine of purgatory is lost on many Catholics. We're not even talking here about Christians outside of the Catholic Church. For them, it's simply pulling a lever and out comes salvation. That's the end of the story, and that's it. On such and such a day I was saved. The Catholic Church has never taught that. Has never taught that, never will. We have to work at our salvation every day. Now, Maria, as the interview begins, can you tell us how you were visited for the first time by a soul in purgatory? Yes. It was in 1940. One night around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard someone coming into my bedroom. This woke me up. I looked to see who on earth could have walked into my bedroom. Were you afraid? No, I'm not at all fearful. Even when I was a little child, I was never afraid. So that night, tell us. Well, I saw a complete stranger. He walked back and forth slowly, and I said to him very severely, "How did you get in here? Go away." But as he continued to walk impatiently around the bedroom, as if he hadn't heard, I asked him again, "Who are you? And what are you doing?" But he still didn't answer. I jumped out of bed and tried to grab him, but I grasped only air. There was nothing there. So I went back to bed, but again I heard him pacing back and forth. And I wondered how I could see this man, but I couldn't grab him. I rose again to hold on to him and keep him from walking around, but I grasped only emptiness. I don't know about you, but if I'm sleeping in my bed and there's somebody walking at the foot of my bed, if I have a gun, he's dying twice. He's already died once. He's going to die a second time. But anyway, she seemed to be able to handle it without a whole lot of fuss and fear. She was puzzled. She went back to bed. He didn't come back, but I couldn't get any sleep. So the next day, I went to talk to my priest in my parish, and I explained the whole situation to him. He told me if this should happen again, I shouldn't ask, "Who are you?" but "What do you want from me?" So the following night, the man returned. Definitely the same man. I asked him, "What do you want from me?" He replied, "Have 3 masses celebrated for me, and I will be delivered." So at that moment, I understood that it was a soul in purgatory. And my priest confirmed this. He also advised me never to turn away any poor soul, but to accept with generosity whatever they may ask of me. And afterwards, did the visits continue? Yes. For several years, there was only some souls, most of all above in November. Afterwards, they became more and more regular. And why November? Because the church, like I said in my homily a couple of weeks ago and even last week, the month of November by the church has always been set aside in a very special way to offer all of our prayers and all of our sacrifices and all of our good deeds and everything for the holy souls. And the reason for that being is the holy souls in purgatory can no longer do anything for themselves. They depend completely on us to pray them out of purgatory. They can't pray for themselves. They can pray for us, but they can't pray for themselves. They can't do anything for themselves. When life ends, it's done. It's finished. It's only here in this life that one can do good things, that one can grow in grace and merit and so on and so on. We can't do it in the afterlife. What do these souls ask of you? In most cases, they ask to have Masses celebrated. Some of them have asked to have the rosary said, and one asked about the Stations of the Cross. And at this point, I asked the question, what exactly is purgatory? I'd say, and I explained the theology of purgatory already. It's kind of a lengthy explanation, but she has a very simple way of saying it as well. I'd say that it's a marvelous invention of God. And as I said in my homily, I think it was the last week or the week before, that purgatory is not an idea that the Catholic Church invented. We didn't come up with it. It's already in the book of Maccabees, 200 years before the time of Christ. It is a holy and noble thing to pray for the souls of the dead, Judas Maccabees writes, after a battle. If a soul is in heaven, no prayer can help them. If a soul is in hell, no prayer can release their sufferings, relieve their suffering in any way, shape, or form. So who's he praying for? The Jews understood quite well that no human being, no matter how good they lived the law, no matter how well they were filled with grace, it didn't matter. No one could stand before God in his infinite perfection, having all this brokenness and selfishness that we carry around within us. And here's how she explained it. Let me give you an image. Suppose that one day a door opens and a splendid being appears, extremely beautiful, a beauty that has never been seen on earth. You are fascinated. You're overwhelmed by this being of light and beauty, even more so that this being shows that he is madly in love with you. And you have never dreamed of being loved so deeply. You sense, too, that this person has a great desire to draw you to him and to be one with you. And the fire of love which burns in your heart impels you to throw yourself into his arms. But wait, you realize at this moment that you haven't washed for months and months, that you smell bad, your nose is runny, your hair is greasy and matted, there are big dirty stains on your clothes, and etc. And so do you say to yourself, no, I just can't present myself in this state. First I must go and wash and take a good shower, and then straight away I will come back. But the love which has been born in your heart is so intense and so burning and so strong that this delay for the shower is absolutely unbearable. And the pain of absence, even if it only lasts for a couple of minutes, is an atrocious wound in the heart proportioned to the intensity of the revelation of the love. It is what we call a love wound. Purgatory is exactly like that. It is a delay imposed by our impurities, a delay before God's embrace. And the human being now, of course, having been judged and having seen God, have a great longing for God and for all eternity, of course, already beginning in purgatory. They are determined in their good. As the souls in hell are determined in evil forever, they don't want to be near God. They don't want to go to heaven. They hate God, but the holy souls in purgatory will one day go to heaven. Nobody from purgatory goes to hell. But they have a tremendous longing to be with God. They have now seen this love, a love for which they were created, a love for which they were made, and for something they really never even understood in this life because they loved everything else but God. So their loves interiorly are very much confused. They never had a real love for God. So now all of a sudden, of course, is the judgment. They have this vision, this experience, and their hearts begin to burn with love for God. Maria, do the souls in purgatory have joy and hope in the midst of their suffering? Yes. No soul would want to come back from purgatory to the earth. They have knowledge which is infinitely beyond ours. They just would never decide to return to the darkness of this world. See, we can't even, I've read this in the lives of many, many saints. They talk about the difference. They talk about the world being a darkness and being a dark place compared to the light of God and the reality of the light which we will one day live in. No soul that is in heaven or in purgatory will ever want to come back to this darkness. Maria, can you tell us now if God, who sends a soul into purgatory, if the soul decides to go there, like I said, a soul itself will decide to go to purgatory in order to purify itself before going to heaven. Maria, at the moment of death, does one see God in full light or an obscure manner, in a manner which is not complete, but at the same time in such brightness that it is enough to cause a great longing? Maria, can you tell us about the role of Our Lady with these souls in purgatory? And I mentioned this before too. Remember that holy souls know if you pray for them. They know if you pray for them because God reveals it to them. And this is why the month of November is dedicated to them. This is why we put this basket here to put the names of souls that we have known. And this is why in our little envelopes we have, on a Feast of All Souls Day, we have an envelope. We put a $10 donation and we stick it in a basket here, and it'll be here until the end of November, and they will participate in every Mass that is offered here on his altar, not just on the weekend. Whether soul is present, whether the person is here or not, the prayers are still offered for them. Can you tell us the role of Our Lady with the souls in purgatory? She comes often to console them. She encourages them. Are there any days in particular on which she delivers them? Above all, of course, Christmas Day, All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, the month of November, Good Friday, the Feast of the Assumption and the Ascension of Jesus. Maria, why does one go to purgatory? And I think this is what we need to pay attention to, because I think we all in some way or another probably struggle with some of this. What are the sins which lead to purgatory? And these sins can also lead a soul to hell, so remember that. Sins against charity, against the love of one's neighbor. It doesn't matter who it is. Hardness of heart, hostility towards others, slandering, wishing evil and bad things upon another, saying wicked things. Of course, that includes gossiping about others, are among some of the worst blemishes which require long purification. Other sins against charity are all our rejection of a certain people we do not like, our refusals to make peace, our refusals to forgive, and all the bitterness we store inside. Over the years as a priest, I've been in parishes, and this is the honest truth. I've been in parishes where one family sat over here and another family sat over here because they couldn't stand each other. They couldn't communicate. They couldn't talk to each other. They would make absolutely certain that they never bumped into each other while they were at church. You have no idea how many times I talked about it, but it didn't change them in any way, shape, or form. And I have no doubt some of that probably goes on here as well. I just haven't noticed it here, but I'm sure it's here. It's a human weakness, our refusal to make peace and to forgive. Marie illustrates this point, which gives us something to think about. It's a story of a woman she knew very well. The lady died, was in purgatory, in the most lowest part of purgatory. Now, purgatory has levels. She was in a place with some of the most atrocious sufferings, and when she came to see Maria, she explained why. She had a female friend. Between them rose a great enmity caused by herself. She had maintained this enmity for years and years, even though her friend had many times asked for peace and for reconciliation, but each time she refused. When she fell gravely ill, she continued to close her heart, to refuse the reconciliation offered by her friend right up to her deathbed. And the human being loves to do those kinds of things because it feels good. Because we are sinners. We like our sins. And if we feel that somebody's offended us or somebody's hurt us, oh no. If I forgive you, that means you got away with it. So we hold on to the sin. And it becomes like a baby blanket wrapped around our souls. Don't die with it on your soul. Because if you don't end up in hell, you'll spend a long time in purgatory. I believe that this example has a great significance concerning rancor, which of course is the sourness of the human being. The human being who, you can tell by looking in their face, they have a sour face. And our words too can be destructive. Like I said, we can never emphasize enough How much a critical or bitter word can truly kill a person. Not that we kill them physically, but we destroy them inside by the way we speak to them and by the way we treat them. But also on the contrary, how much a good word can heal. What are the means we can take on earth to avoid purgatory and go straight to heaven? We must do a great deal for souls in purgatory. We must love God above all things. We must have much humility. This is the greatest weapon against evil one. Humility drives evil away. There's a lot of pages here, and there's too much to try to cover it all. Maria can now tell us what are the most effective means to help to deliver the souls in purgatory, and she makes it very clear the most efficient means is the Mass. And I talked last week about in Rome, in Italy, about a mile and a half from the Basilica, St. Peter's Basilica. If you walk straight down the Tiber River on the left-hand side, you will come to a French Gothic Church of the Sacred Heart. And there's a sign outside that says Museo de Purgatory. And the first time when I was in a seminary, I went to visit Rome, and my brothers took me there. And they said, this is where the church places all the artifacts of all the holy souls that have been allowed to come back to visit loved ones, those that are still on earth, and have masses offered for them. And all of the different things that were there, all of them wanted masses offered for them. Masses. So it's important to remember our loved ones, certainly in Mass, because it's Christ who offers himself out of love for us. Remember, the Mass is Christ's offering. It's his sacrifice. The priest is only God's representative because it's God himself who offers himself and sacrifices himself for us. The efficacy of the Mass for the deceased is even greater for those who attach great value to the Mass during their lives. Sometimes for many people, Mass is really nothing. It doesn't mean anything. We go to church so we don't end up going to hell, but Mass, we never really get into it. We don't participate in it. We don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. We're 2,000 miles away in our minds. We're here physically, but spiritually we're somewhere else. And that's the sad part, because it does happen. But those who've had a great love for the Mass will also participate in that love when they die. And the souls for whom they prayed in life certainly will pray for them. A soul in purgatory sees very clearly on the day of his funeral if we really pray for him, if we simply made an act of presence to show that we were there. The poor souls say that tears are no good to them, only prayers at the Mass. Often they complain that people go to funerals without addressing a single prayer to God, while shedding many tears. How useless this is. Now, the human being in his nature is going to cry when somebody dies. Certainly, it's part of our emotional expression. Christ died when Lazarus died, of course, but that's a little bit different. Many people, and I've done many funerals over the years, and I've heard some of the loudest wailing noises you can possibly imagine, and all I want to say is just slow down a little bit. Offer some prayers to God and allow God to console you in your struggles, in your discomfort, and in your loss. But people go to church without ever offering a prayer to God, and that's very sad, because it's exactly what happened. And that's why we've lost the idea of purgatory. We've lost the idea of accountability, because we don't go to church to pray, especially at a funeral. For me as a priest, personally, I like funerals least of all. I don't like them simply because most of the people are at Mass haven't been to church in years. They don't know how to respond. They don't know how to react. They come into the church and they make the church like a museum. They make the church like a parish hall. Everybody's walking around talking to everybody. Nobody cares that God Christ is here. Nobody gets on their knees to pray. Everybody just wants to be seen acting out. It's sad, but it's reality. Maria, you've been invited many times to suffer for the poor souls in order to deliver them. Can you tell us what you have experienced and undergone during these times? The first time a soul came to me and asked me if I wouldn't mind suffering for 3 hours in my body for her, and afterwards I could resume working. So I said to myself, well, If it'll all be over in 3 hours, I could accept it. During these 3 hours, I had the impression that it lasted for 3 days, and it was so painful. But at the end, I looked at my watch, and I saw it only lasted for 3 hours. The soul told me that by accepting that suffering with love for 3 hours, I had saved her 20 years of purgatory time. Maria, why can one no longer gain merits in purgatory when one can on earth? Because, like I said, at the moment of death, the time to earn merits is over. For as long as we are living on earth, we can repair the evil we have done. The souls in purgatory envy us at this opportunity. Even the angels are jealous of us, for we have the possibility of growing in love and goodness for as long as we are alive. What is the role of contrition or repentance at the moment of death? Contrition is very important. Sins can be forgiven in any case, but there remains always the consequence of sin, which we call the relic of sin. I've explained that in my theology on purgatory. If one wishes to receive a full indulgence at the moment of death, the soul has to be free from all attachments. How many of us can honestly say if we died today, we were free from all attachments? How many of us have attached to our cell phones and our communication networks and all of that? I go to families' homes, and I watch the young kids, and the battery dies on their cell phone. Oh, you think the world has come to an end? They can't send selfies. They can't talk to their friends. They can't communicate. Oh, my gosh. Screaming and yelling. And so, where's my charger? And so, can I use your phone? Father, can I use your phone? No, sorry. My phone doesn't do selfies. So besides that, I don't use phones that are smarter than me. So... because we're attached to things have thrown their chains around us. Maria, at the moment of death, does God reveal himself with the same intensity to all souls? No, he doesn't. Each one is given a knowledge of his life and also what he will have to endure if he goes to purgatory, but it's not the same for everyone. The intensity of the Lord's revelation depends on each one's life. It depends how much love I had for God in my heart when I die. Maria, does the devil have permission to attack us at the moment of death? Yes. But man also has the grace to resist him, to push him away. So if a man does not want anything to do with him, the devil can do nothing. I'm going to end it here because time is running short. If you're interested in reading this book, or if you want to certainly listen to the homilies, you can get them on the internet, probably Amazon.com. Has this book. It's called The Amazing Secret of the Souls in Purgatory, an interview with Maria Sims. Sister Emmanuel is the one who does the interview. So if you're interested in getting it, certainly there's a whole lot more that goes on here as she talks about cases and situations and the visits, the Blessed Mother and the guardian angels and all the things that go on in purgatory. So if you're interested in learning more about it, you certainly can get the book. It may even be on the internet, I don't know.